And we're back here at 7:07 a.m. And as promised, Dr. Kathy Rollo, Superintendent of Lubbock Public Schools, is here in the studio with us. Good morning,
Good
Dr.
morning.
Rollo. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having us today.
How are things at LISD?
Things are great. We are into the spring semester and things are moving quickly. We're moving into the season of competitions, a lot of state competitions. Just an exciting time in Lubbock ISD.
So when are we going to get year-round school again?
Well, we don't know about that.
I don't think that's on the agenda.
That's quite on our agenda at this point in time.
When I was a kid, I did not want year-round school, and they used to talk about it. But now that I'm a parent, I'm like,
now it doesn't sound so bad.
Why don't we have year-round school? Those kids, they need that.
We're going to have spring break here before you know it.
That's right. That's right.
Spring break's in March.
It is in March, the second week in March.
Jeez. This year is already flying by too fast.
It really is.
Of course, what's going on in Austin is I'm sure you guys are paying close attention to right now.
Yes, it's definitely at the top of our list. And our number one legislative priority is for Lubbock ISD is we really would love to see a bill come forward that supports funding full-day pre-K. Lubbock ISD serves just under 28,000 students, and 70% of those students are living in poverty. And we know that children who come from poor neighborhoods actually come to school speaking or hearing 30 million fewer words than their more privileged counterparts. And so we call it the vocabulary gap. And so if we can get kids in school earlier, we have more of an opportunity to bridge that gap, to close that gap so that our students have an equal lives chance.
Well, are we talking migrants mostly?
No, we're talking about our children who live here and stay here.
So one question I had, also, there's a social and understanding aspect of going to school. When you walk into kindergarten, the kids that haven't gone to preschool, they have no idea where to go, what to do. They don't necessarily know how to follow the lines and do all the social things.
Absolutely.
Especially if they've just been with their parents the whole time. And that as well, the pre-K. I know that with my kids, we only have them in a 2-day pre-K, but that's helped them drastically as far as the social aspect of being prepared for school.
It makes an immense difference in their success in school when they've had that pre-K experience. And we have pre-K offered at every one of our elementary schools, and we are even expanding 3-year-old pre-K. The problem we face is that Lubbock ISD, we go ahead and we support full-day pre-K, but the state only funds half of a day. And so it's an investment. We realize that, but we believe and we have research that shows that it's an investment that absolutely pays off and helps students to be successful.
So we're talking about legislative agenda, and I just don't know the Lubbock process of getting your agenda to Austin. Do y'all have a lobbyist? Do you have a group of people that go there? I mean, how do y'all do that?
That's a great question. So Dr. McCord and Friendship ISD and Keith Bryant of Lubbock Cooper ISD, the three of us sit down and we generate a list of legislative priorities that are good for all of us in this area. And we share those with the Chamber of Commerce. And then they go forth with their legislative agenda, which covers more than education, but education is definitely a big part of that because we're all charged with getting a workforce ready. But then Lubbock ISD creates our own legislative priorities, and then we actually had a meeting in the fall where we sat down with all of our representatives and walked through these priorities. And then we stay in communication with them throughout the session. They'll call us, we call them, and stay in communication because that's important. We also are members of different organizations that lobby on our behalf. The Texas School Alliance is an organization of the 40 largest districts in Texas, and we are one of those. And so they definitely lobby on our behalf. We're members of the Equity Center, which is a group that lobbies to create equitable funding for schools across the state.
Well, what are some of the things that are your priorities that you're looking for this year?
Well, and I have Jeff Baum with us, and he is our Chief Financial Officer, and he actually presents on behalf of the Equity Center as well. So pre-K funding is absolutely our number one priority. And then special education funding, the weights on that have not been changed in over a decade, yet the needs have grown, and so that's absolutely something that we would like to see happen.
And let me, with special ed, I'm trying to remember, we've talked about this before, but Lubbock has one of the best special ed programs in the area, or if not the best, and some schools just don't do it anymore.
Well, you have to do it. It's the
okay.
law. You have to provide the best education you can, or free and appropriate education that you can, in the least restrictive environment.
Now, we're talking special education is for challenged children, right?
Yes, and there's a wide array of needs that we need to address, whether it's from speech therapy services, all the way to, autism, to severe, profound learning needs. So we do serve students, and we have a wide array of services that we provide. We generate $18.8 million in special ed weighted funds, but we spend $26.2 million. And so we are spending above and beyond what is provided to help make sure we're meeting the needs of our students. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I would just say, for a long time, there's been a struggle amongst Texas schools to realize a level of equity and adequacy. We've seen lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and got a lot of things that were fixed in the last session. But when the both chambers show up and identify it as their priority to fix school finance, we get excited about that. Obviously, there are varying amounts. There's roughly between $6 billion and $9 billion, whether you look at the Senate plan or the House plan, that is yet to be properly delineated. But we're encouraged by the fact that there are going to be monies that are added to education, and it seems to be one of their greatest priorities.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll get into the rest of the legislative session and y'all's priorities.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we're back at 7:20 here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. And again, back with Dr. Kathy Rollo, the Superintendent of Lubbock Public Schools. Dr. Rollo, I guess that got to be the big thing, or at least one of the biggest things, is teacher pay raises that apparently is coming out of Austin.
Yes, we are hearing through Senate Bill 3, which is in its very early stages, but is a across-the-board $5,000 pay raise for teachers with students assigned to them.
So $10,000 after 2 years.
Yes.
That's a pretty sizable raise.
Well, and we all agree that we believe we want to pay our teachers more. We know the value of our quality teachers in the classroom, and they are where the rubber meets the road. Our concern with that particular bill is that we also know that behind every great teacher is great teaching assistants, great counselors. Our school systems are made up of lots of people that wrap around and provide support for our students, and that bill does not include money for them. And so that just is one of the concerns we have.
So does every school in Lubbock have a counselor?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, some of our small elementary schools actually share a counselor, so one counselor would float between two schools. But yes, we at least have access to a counselor on every campus.
Okay. So what are some of the other points that you're working on?
Well, we've talked about full-time or full-day pre-K funding. We've talked about increasing special ed weights. One of our other areas is around our CTE programming, and we've had lots of conversations on previous shows with you guys about the importance of preparing our students for the workforce and the work we do with CTE programming, particularly at our Byron Martin Technology Center. We would love to see a bill that would expand that weighted funding for CTE courses to the 8th grade. We would really love our 8th graders to have the opportunity to explore those principal courses that help expose them to those career pathways. And right now, that funding is not available if those courses are in the 8th grade. So we would love to see that moved to that level so that we could hit the ground running in 9th grade with students beginning to follow one of those career pathways.
Okay, and I don't know how, but some schools have kind of walked away from CTE because it's very expensive. Your automotive programs and other things like that, there's just a lot of money involved in that. And Lubbock has actually invested into it and expanded it to some extent with the Byron Martin and even some things at the schools themselves.
Yes, we absolutely have expanded it. If there's an interest on the part of our students and on the part of our community, and that there's a need for students trained and ready to go into the workforce, then that's what we need to do. And so Yes, and part of that is because of economies of scale. Being a larger district, we can have more of those offerings. And then sometimes we have to look at what students are not interested in and then make some changes. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Just say one of the prioritized measures that schools are graded on now is their college career and military readiness, and our CTE center is producing kids that are ready to go into the workforce. And as it relates to teacher pay, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of the card you're on, we are producing students that are capable of going out day one upon graduating high school and earning more than a teacher that is able to earn after a 4-year education and all the expenses associated with it. So there are some great certification programs that we offer that are getting kids ready for entry-level careers that they can blossom in.
We're talking about in the trades mostly.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I know some of my clients, plumbers, heating, air conditioning people, desperately looking for people in that field, and electricians and welders and on and on.
Yes, and we're producing students ready to go to work in those fields.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this, but we actually had someone that wanted to know how to get into that program whenever y'all were here, right after y'all left. And we had to tell, South Plains College has some great programs, but y'all are for high schoolers only.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, we are for high schoolers only.
Well, testing is, what is that? That's coming up, isn't it?
Well, really, it's at the very end of the school year, so it'll be in May.
Okay. Transfers, that is now closed, I take it?
Yes, transfers are closed, and parents should be notified very soon if they did apply for a transfer. So we're looking forward to that, and students are in the process, or at the beginning stages of beginning to make.
So is this the transfer application, is that, if you call it that, is that occur like each semester?
It occurs in the spring. Yes.
Okay.
It's a once
and
a
this
year.
is for next year.
Yes, this is for next school year.
So you kind of have to make up your mind.
Yes,
you
do. And then
you can't procrastinate.
That's right. And students are busy making plans of course selections for next year. So
do you have a lot of transfers this year, more than usual?
I really have not seen the final count. The window closed last week, and so I have not seen what that final count is. But we typically do. We do have a lot of choice within Lubbock ISD, so we typically do have a large number of students who transfer to other schools.
So this talks about state accountability and assessment. These are some of the notes that you had brought up, and it asks about the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Is that the test that they take?
That is actually not the tests
Okay.
that they take. Those are actually the standards that the state says that all students should know and be able to do by content area and grade level. And then the test is the STAR, and the STAR is based on those standards.
Okay.
But one of the things that we would love for the state to consider doing is just narrowing their focus. There's never a standard that someone doesn't love. And so in Texas, we have a lot of standards, particularly when it comes to social studies. And so we would love to see the state continue to focus on narrowing those standards so that we can go deeper instead of wider. Learn fewer things, but learn them very, very well.
Yeah. We have a texter this morning that says, will LISD endorse HB2? This is from Chris.
And HB2 is
It's the tax reform bill.
tax reform bill.
Both the House bill and the Senate bill are identical at this point, and really the majority of what I'm seeing on those, other than the 2.5% tax cap, is some change and some transparency ideas that we have absolutely no issue with. You know, our fiscal year, we adjusted it to July 1. Schools typically operate on a September 1 fiscal year begin. So we adopt our budget earlier in the process. And so one of the things that those two bills do is move the certification deadline up from July 25th up to July 10th. It still puts us outside of our budget year. Fortunately, we see very little variance in our preliminary values and our certified values, so we are able to adopt our budget on early values.
Well, that about wraps it up. We're running up against the clock here.
Wow.
And so glad you came out. I hope we were able to cover all the topics that you wanted to talk about today.
Well, yes. Thank you so much for having us today.
Glad to have you as always.